Hi, and welcome back. Again, today we're thinking about Lent and Jesus' story, his life, his suffering, his death, resurrection, and his ultimate ascension. And we're going to, in particular, look at the book of Ephesians today and see how Jesus' story then becomes our story when we become united with him. So stay tuned and let's check it out. Welcome back to Kairos Conversations. I'm one of your hosts, Courtney Trotter. I teach Hebrew here at Kairos Classroom, and I'm the Old Testament enthusiast, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Ryan Martin, our New Testament Greek guy. If you're someone who likes to dig into the original languages, you want to know more about Greek and Hebrew resources or the original cultures of the Bible, then you have found the right place, because here we want to discover the world of the Bible through the original languages. All right, Ryan, we kind of led in here with the fact that we're going to look at the book of Ephesians and how Christ's story then becomes our story. And so I think maybe a good place to start would just to be laying out that, what is the flow of Ephesians as a whole?
Yeah, we like resisting here at Kairos this impulse that we have to kind of like de-narrativize. Is that a word? De-dramatize. How about that? The Bible in these beautiful kind of structures of story and narrative, and kind of like force them into bullet points, things that would make good like sermon bullet points or fit into a systematic theology chapter. Not that there's anything wrong with good sermons or systematic theology, but we really want to let the Bible speak for itself in its genre, in its literary context, the way that it flows. And I have seen a lot of squeezing Ephesians into bullet points. So I want to very quickly just say what happens in the first half of Ephesians, because it's beautiful. We get this story of Jesus, this kind of hymn, this long run-on sentence saying who Jesus is and what he's done, and how God has redeemed, summed all things together in him. This beautiful story about Jesus. And that moves into talking about humanity, talking about us and our being dead and not okay. I mean, it's like sharp contrast, right? But we are made alive together with Christ. How God in Christ has redeemed, adopted, rescued us. But it doesn't stop there either. We zoom out to the level of the community, of the church, and all of its various different races and kinds, and Jews and Gentiles, and about how when those Jews and Gentiles live and worship and work together as the unified people of God by one Spirit, that is a message to the enemies of God that they have been defeated, right? And that we, even in all of our different places that we are, I get to rule and reign with Christ over God's enemies. It's amazing. It's cosmic. It's huge. It's not just me and my sin problem and how I get right with Jesus. It's not less than that, but it's so much more than that. And the way that the story flows is just a great picture of how we participate in God's vision of resurrecting a broken cosmos.
I love how you put that together, saying like, okay, we're starting in chapter 1 with this huge, massive run-on sentence, if you're reading it in Greek, talking about everything that the believer has in Christ and telling us Christ's story. And then it shifts that in chapter 2. Again, we go from Christ being exalted and alive at the right hand of the Father to then we're dead. And we're the ones who rebelled against God, but then kind of bringing us back up and exalting us back up alongside Christ. And then ultimately, like you said, having that final trajectory in the church as well. And all of that set within this cosmic battle of defeating the powers of darkness. It could be easy. Like you said, we have so many of these great Bible verses memorized. It could be easy to forget them in that whole overarching sweep. And then again, you get to Ephesians chapter 6, where again, it is resumed that, spiritual warfare aspect of our salvation in Christ. But in particular, if we look at chapter 1 and chapter 2 right beside each other, there's some like strong linguistic connections in Greek that just make it even more exciting for you as a believer. So can you lay out those connections for us so we can see it?
Yeah, this is so cool. And what we're about to show you is very simple. We got some slides lined up that'll help you see these things, but we want you just to cue into a few individual words and see what's happening here, because it tells the story of what this book, what this letter is trying to do in a very subtle and interesting way. So let's start with Ephesians 1 and look at verses 19 through 21 here, talking about the strength of the power of God's might, right? That he worked in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion. Right? So this is what God has done for Jesus, ultimately for us, right? These blessings we have in Christ is kind of the subject of Ephesians 1, but we're seeing these words applied, these being raised, being seated with, this is happening to Jesus, all right? Let's fast forward to Ephesians 2, and I want to see if you can pick up on any of the same language here, right? Ephesians 2, this is now God talking about what he has done for us. But God, being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. All right, now if you caught what's similar between the two, congratulations, gold star, blue ribbon, whatever. But I'm going to go back and highlight them now, right? So that we can't even miss. All right, here's Ephesians 1, what God did in Christ, right? He raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places. Egero and kathizo are our Greek words there that we have highlighted, right? Now, back to Ephesians 2. By grace you have been saved and raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Jesus Christ. Do you see the parallel here? Jesus was raised and seated at the right hand of the Father. And what do we get in Ephesians 2? We get that we have been raised with Christ and seated with Christ. It's the same words, right? Same words that we get when we see Jesus' story and our story, right? Side by side. And again, this makes sense in the broad arguments of Ephesians for sure, but even these particular ideas are beautiful, that we have resurrection, that we've been raised because Christ has been raised, and that we are seated in the heavenlies, as the New Testament would put it. We are with the Lord because Jesus was raised and seated at the right hand of God.
I think that's just like such a beautiful picture of what it looks to be a believer right now. That, like, again, this is one of those things that, like, the victory that we will have at the end of days is something that we can live and walk in right now because Christ has already obtained that victory for us. One thing I like in particular about this, we do a lot of looking at the Greek and Hebrew here on our videos, but this is something we want to help you, even if you don't know Greek or Hebrew, to begin to key into some of these places where you could find this in your English translation. And so this is one thing I like, is that, like, if I was being a really good English astute reader, that I would see these withs and realize that, like, hey, this is the same language from chapter 1 to chapter 2, just because this one word with. But whenever we look at it in Greek, it's even more evident, right?
Yes, it's even more evident. And it is great. I mean, we're very thankful for English Bible translators here at Kairos. And, what a great way that by keeping those words the same and just adding with, or together with, that you see the connection. But even, again, even if you don't know any Greek, check this out. I've got the Greek word from Ephesians 1 on the left and from Ephesians 2 on the right. And if you don't know what those silly symbols mean, you see the same thing on the left as on the right, don't you? But just with soon at the beginning, with that same little prefix. That prefix means with. Okay? So if you're looking at that saying, wait, are you telling me that were raised together with is one word in Greek? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Do you see how obvious the author is making it, that we have these words in Ephesians 1 as in Jesus was raised, was seated. And then we have these same words in Ephesians 2, but just with a with on the beginning of it. Soon egero, sug kathizo. Same words, just with soon, because this is our story because of our union with Christ. It's amazing. And preceding these two words, we get this word made alive together with, also one word in Greek. You can see it highlighted there in Greek and in English. It's another soon word. Soon, it's together life making. It's together life made. One word in Greek. And then what does that mean? What does that look like? That's when we get the two words that we just saw. It looks like being raised as Christ is raised and seated above all the enemies of God, just like Christ is seated above all the enemies of God. It's Christ's story, and because his rescue mission to deliver us and unite us to himself, that is also our story.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I've got this really quick anecdote that I want to share with you. But these are words that Paul is basically making up by putting like these three words, like, with life making together or something like that. And it reminds me of, my dad is originally from Brazil, and whenever he came to America, he did not know English at all, and he moved to the American South, where we can tend to run words together. And so he thought the word "how's your mama" in them was one word. He did not realize that was like a whole sentence. And so he thought, like, whenever he asked, "how's your mama" in them, that's just like how you're asking somebody, like, "how are you?"
Wait, hold on. Translate for us. You're saying, "how's your mama and them"?
How's your mama and them? And you just say, "how's your mama and them?"
Yep. Difference.
Yeah.
No.
I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought so.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, I think like somewhere like again, I don't know German, but I feel like there's a certain flexibility in some languages to kind of like put things together and the audience will understand. For in English, maybe unless we're in the Deep South, we don't do that quite as much. Right. But I think that there's some beauty in that, and it makes it pop off the page more, doesn't it? I mean, saying "raised together with," maybe that sounds a little weird, but it sounds weirder when it's like one word. Kind of one made up word, and especially that made alive together with is I think unique. Check me in the comments if I'm wrong about this. I don't think there's any other attestation of that in Koine Greek in Greek literature at all, describing our position relative to Christ, that we are made alive because of our union, because of our belonging to Him.
I think that's really helpful. And like you said, it's just unique to Paul. And so we can kind of tune into that if we know the Greek, or if, again, you get a really good study Bible, it lets you know these things that can help you with that as well. So what is this connection? We talked a lot about this concept, union with Christ. What does this connection tell us about union with Christ?
Yeah, I think for the author of Ephesians, if it's Paul, like for Paul to say, what does it mean to be, adopted, to be reconciled, to be redeemed, even I think on a certain reading to be justified, like all of these things, like how do we sum them up? How do they happen? Where is this located? It's in our union with Christ. It's that his story is our story. It's that somehow like the truest version of Ryan Martin is the in Christ version of Ryan Martin. And I don't even completely understand what that means. But I think in Paul's theology, there's a sense in which I have died and been raised in Christ, right? In his truest humanity. I have this weird pet peeve, and I get teased about it when I bring it up, but I don't like it when people say, "I'm sorry I did that. I'm only human. I'm sorry I made that mistake. I'm only human." Because my nerdy theology brain goes to like Jesus is fully human. Like humanity does not entail maybe limit. I'm getting way over my head in philosophical theology here. It doesn't imply sin, right? Jesus is fully human, fully God, and is the perfect vision of what humanity was made to be. Perfectly imaging God and in perfect union with Him. We don't need to become less human. We need to become more human as Jesus is, right? And that's what we have in virtue of our connection with Him. Right? What does it mean to be fully Ryan, to be fully human? It means to belong to Jesus, which is remarkable. And Paul's letters specifically tell this story over and over and over again. I'm just thinking of Romans 6, "For we have been united with Him in a death like His. We shall certainly be united with Him in a resurrection like His. We know that our old self was crucified with Him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. For the one who has died has been set free from sin, and if we have died with Christ, we believe that we will also live with Him." So we've died Christ's death, and we both already and not yet are raised / will be raised with Him. So this is not some like peripheral, like extra, thing that we add onto our theology. This is the center of it. This is the center of the New Testament, that I belong to Jesus and he belongs to me, and that he's hitched his wagon to mine so that where he goes, I go. He goes through suffering and death to resurrection, and that by the grace of God, not by my own doing. That's my story too.
Right. Yeah. No, this is such a helpful concept that's really changed the way I think about things. But I mean, I think even for most Christians, if they haven't thought about union with Christ deeply, quite like this, and especially in kind of a supernatural spiritual sense, we do have our baptismal formula often will be say, you're buried with Christ in baptism and raised to walk in newness of life. That we, again, like you were mentioning, we're crucified with him, we die with him so that we are raised and exalted and eventually resurrected with him. And this goes back, a long ways in the history of the church and theology. The Eastern Church would call this theosis, the process by which we are being made like Christ, the process by which, in like Paul's terms, we're being transformed or conformed into the image of the Son. And, there's lots of other theologians who are keying in on this as well. Michael Gorman, his talk of union participation in with Christ, or if you're Lutheran, Jordan Cooper has a book called Christification, the process of becoming like Christ. There's tons of books out there right now exploring this concept. And really it's the creator became the creature so that all of creation might experience recreation through him. So that's why we get this Revelation 21 to 22, new heavens, new earth stuff, because God bound himself in Christ to the world so that the world might be saved through him. Yeah.
Man, that's goosebump stuff. I mean, that's the best news. It's the God in his freedom, going from Bart here, God in his freedom bound himself to you and to me, to humanity. That's the best news ever for us, because we belong to Jesus, for better or for worse, right?
Right.
And this is the very best news. And I think Ephesians does a great job of showing how the story of Jesus and his vindication, that story belongs to us, again, already and not yet. But already, but already right now, a certain sense seated with Jesus above the enemies of God and living in his life and his power. It's great news.
Like you said, not to be outdone by Ephesians chapter 3, where we're being formed into a new creation community. So that all of our churches, I like to say, are outposts of heaven, outposts of that heaven on earth reality. All right. Well, any resources you want to point us towards that we could dig into this a little bit more? I know I already kind of mentioned some, so maybe I took away your thunder a little bit, but any more that you like?
Yeah. I mean, if I speak personally, I'm reading right now, Gombis's The Drama of Ephesians. And I think in terms of painting this big picture, cosmic battle, and we've been talking about this a lot in the wake of Michael Heiser's passing, and trying to understand the ancient worldview of God and Jesus' victory over the powers. I mean, it's a great study in Ephesians, I think, from that ancient Near Eastern mindset, and trying to, again, without throwing all the beautiful individual truths of what me, as a sinner saved by grace, can know about my relationship with God. We're not trying to throw those out, but we're trying to expand upon them and see that is a part of a bigger plan to rescue the whole cosmos, and that we as individuals get to partake in that and participate in that. So The Drama of Ephesians, Tim Gombis, is what I'm reading right now on that front.
Yeah, so we'll have those resources kind of linked in the description. Like I said, Michael Gorman or Gombis, we'll have those books linked there, because they are great.
This Cruciformity, I've got Union with Christ over across the room somewhere. But yeah, if you're interested with that kind of in Christ stuff, what does it mean to be united with Christ, and the connection between, say, like theosis in the Eastern theological tradition, and kind of union with Christ in the more formed or just broader Protestant tradition. I mean, there's a lot of overlap there that's really intriguing right now from the kind of happening in the Theological Academy, that I think really touches the ground. I think it's very meaningful and exciting, just as we think about what it means to belong to Jesus. So fun. It's a fun topic right now.
It's a very huge topic. Huge topic right now. And if just to throw this in there, if you're someone who's one of our Michael Heiser fans, Ron Johnson, who'd done a lot of work with Michael Heiser, his specific dissertation was Paul's use of the Old Testament in relating to the principalities and powers. And his big thesis is that the Elohim that are mentioned in the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me, are what Paul is referring to in the principalities and powers in Ephesians and throughout the rest of his work. So that's, if you want to check out his dissertation, it's also a really great place as well. So yeah, thank you, Ryan, for walking through all of that with us. Again, we're always so grateful anytime you get to teach us and show us a little bit more about the Greek. If you're someone who likes this kind of content, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. We have a Patreon as well. You can check us out there. And until we see you next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.